Well, good afternoon. We're continuing on with the commentary on the book of 2 Samuel. We're up to chapter 6 today. The title of chapter 6 is David Brings the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath-Jearim. This chapter shows us a very important lesson. When the Philistines took the ark off the battlefield, when they defeated the Israeli army, they did not killed for handling the ark because they were unbelievers and did not know any difference. When they sent it back to Israel on a new cart hauled by 2 cows, no one got killed. But God had clearly laid down instructions in his word to Moses about how the priests, and only the priests, were allowed to carry the ark on wooden poles. Now, up until now, David had always asked God about what he should do before he does anything. But here in this chapter, he forgets. And because of that, someone needlessly lost their life. Again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000 special troops. And David arose and went with all of his people that were with him from Baal, which is Kiriath-Jearim, of Judah, to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, that dwells between the cherubims. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, that was in Gibeah. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. So, at this stage, they're doing exactly the same as what the Philistines did when they sent the ark back out of Philistinia back into back into Israel. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was in Gibeah, accompanied the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all of the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even of harps, and of psalteries, and of timbrels, and of cornets, and of cymbals. Now David mobilized 30,000 special troops, and led them to Baal Judah, which is Kiriath-Jearim, to bring home the ark of the Lord of heaven, enthroned above Jearim. Here we clearly make the distinction. The God of Israel, the Lord of the heavenly hosts, lives above the cherubim in his presence, is seen by the ark, but Allah does not live in the ark. The ark was placed upon a new cart and taken from the hillside home of Abinadab in Gibeah. It was driven by Abinadab's sons, Uzzah and Ahio. Ahio was walking in front of the procession and was followed by David and all the other leaders of Israel, who were joyously waving branches of juniper trees and playing every kind of musical instrument before the Lord: lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. And when they came to Nashon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. And David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How shall the ark of the Lord come to me?" This should have been the question he asked right at the beginning of the chapter, but he didn't. So David would not remove the ark of the Lord unto him to the city of David. David carried it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all of his household. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nashon, the oxen stumbled, and as a reflex action, Uzzah put out his hand to steady the ark, so that it would not be damaged or fall off the cart, which is a logical, human thing to do, but it was not a spiritual thing to do. Then the anger of the Lord flared out against Uzzah, and God killed him for doing this. So he died there, right beside the ark of the Lord. David was angry at what the Lord had done, and named the spot the place of wrath upon Uzzah, which is still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord and asked, "How can I ever bring the ark home to the city of David?" This is the question that David should have asked the Lord before he even started to move it, because it was not to be carried on a cart, to be carried by the priests, as is written in the scriptures. So again, not asking God for advice, David decided to take the ark of God into the city of David, but it carried it instead to the home of Obed-Edom, who came from Gath. The ark remained there for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his household, a whole household. And it was told David, saying, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all of that pertains unto him, because the ark of God." So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. But before moving the ark this time, David must have consulted the sacred writings so that he knew the correct way to transport the ark. Now we see that the ark is being correctly carried by priests on poles, and there are sacrifices every 6 steps, so that this journey is going to be a journey covered in blood. 13. And it was so that when they bare the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, they stopped, and he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced before the Lord with all of his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. Now, only special priests were allowed to wear ephods in the Old Testament. This is in fact a prophetic picture of Jesus, the son of Jesse, as the special high priest of the order of Melchizedek. So David and all of his house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. As the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, that's David's first wife, Saul's daughter, looked through the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. When David heard that the Lord was blessing Obed-Edom because the ark was in his house, David decided to move the ark to the city of David, which is Jerusalem, with a great celebration. But this time he had learned his lesson and had researched who was to handle the ark and how it was to be moved. After the priests who were carrying the ark had moved 6 steps, they stopped, so that David could sacrifice an ox and a fat lamb. So the profession of the ark was slow, with much sacrifices and much dancing and playing instruments. David danced before the Lord with all of his might, wearing priestly garments and an ephod. So Israel brought home the ark of the Lord to Jerusalem with much shouting and blowing of trumpets. But as the procession came into the city, Michal, Saul's daughter, watched from a window and saw David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she was filled with contempt for him in her heart. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in his place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offerings and burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dealt among the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, as well as the women as to the men, to everyone a cake of bread and a good piece of flesh and a flagon of wine. So all of the people departed, everyone to his house, to continue the celebration. The ark was placed inside the tent, which David had prepared for it, and he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. Then he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of heaven. He also gave a present to everyone, men and women alike, a loaf of bread, some wine, and a cake of raisins. King James Version says he gave everyone a good piece of flesh. This infers that many animals would have had to be slaughtered to provide these good pieces of flesh to everyone. Then David returned to his own house to bless his own household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaidens of his servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovers himself." She was disgusted. And David said unto Michal, his first wife, "It was before the Lord which chose me before thy father, and before all of his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, all over Israel. Therefore I will play before the Lord. And I will yet be viler than you, and will be base in my own sight, and of the maidservants which you have spoken of them shall I be honoured." Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children until the day of her death. When this celebration was over and everyone had returned to their homes, David returned to bless his own family. Throughout all of these proceedings, there is no mention of what the high priest was doing. Was the high priest even involved in the return of the ark of the city of David or not? Doesn't say. The reason I ask is that the scripture tells us that David is wearing the priestly ephod, which is reserved for special priests. But Michal, David's first wife, who was Saul's daughter, came out to meet him and exclaimed in disgust, "How glorious the king of Israel looked today. He exposed himself to the girls along the street like a common pervert." David retorted, "I was dancing before the Lord, who chose me above your father and his whole family, and who appointed me as leader of Israel, who are the people of the Lord. So I am willing to act like a fool in order to show my joy in the Lord. Yes, and I am willing to look even more foolish than this. But in doing so, I will be respected by the girls that you spoke of." So the Lord closed up Michal's womb, and she remained childless through the rest of her life.